Chen Jingguan, unable to hold back his anger any longer, challenged Wu Di from the investigation team from the Jiangnan district to a duel for looking down on him. A few moments earlier, Zhang Yi, upon hearing what Bian Jun was said, had a relaxed smile on his face. Now he was the most leisurely one. His family had not suffered any losses, and he has solved the zombie problem within his sphere of influence. Even if he wants to fight, he is not afraid of anyone. But the other forces did not share the same sentiment. They've been busy with their own problems and didn't have the time to deal with other matters. So as everyone acquiesced to Bian Junwu's proposal, Zhang Yi said with a frown, "Our next step should be about how to solve the crisis of the zombies and the mutant giant rats. You see, in this crisis, the Snow Worship sect had undoubtedly suffered the most severe losses. Several members were either eaten or infected. And if things continue as it is, then it was obvious that the foundation of the Snow Worship sect will be destroyed." But at that moment, there was a sudden loud commotion outside which made everyone subconsciously wonder what the problem could be. At this time, outside the central building, Chen Jingguan, who had been holding back his anger for a long time, points an accusatory finger at Wu Di and said with a gloomy face, "What's so great about you people from Jiangnan district? What's so great about it? I used to be in the Navy. Come and fight me if you have the guts. Or are you afraid you will lose so you want to go cry to your boss first?" Unbeknownst to them, everything said could be heard clearly from the inside. Inside, Wei Dinghai frowned slightly when he heard Chen Jingguan's voice, and although he didn't know what happened that led to the current situation outside, it was obvious that Chen Jingguan and the investigation team had confronted each other, and the atmosphere was a little stiff. What's going on with this kid? He silently thought. Wei Dinghai's face changed, and he subconsciously looked at Bian Junwu, who was sitting not far away. Bian Junwu noticed Wei Dinghai's gaze, turned his head and asked, "What's wrong?" "Nothing, just a little conflict among our subordinates," Xing Tian suddenly replied with a smile. He presumed that everyone wanted their subordinates outside to resolve the issue themselves, and didn't require their assistance. After all, a little conflict wasn't a big deal. And indeed his presumptions were correct because Bian Junwu's next words were a direct affirmation of it. "Oh, a little conflict?" Bian Junwu looked indifferent. "Let them deal with their own affairs. We still have very important things to talk about." With those words, it was obvious that he had no intention of finding out what the problem outside was. And it also seems that Bian Junwu was very confident in the strength of his men. Hearing this, everyone had no choice but to return to the discussion at hand. At the same time, outside the central building, Kong Sheng, with an amused smile on his face, had joined Wu Di. Seeing Kong Sheng, Wu Di, with one hand on his waist and the other pointing at Chen Jingguan, said to Kong Sheng, "Look at this. This guy's been angry ever since I said only his boss was allowed inside." Kong Sheng had his arm folded when he replied that what else could useless people such as Chen Jingguan do except being incompetent and furious. Hearing this, Wu Di responded, "But they had already challenged us to a fight. And if we don't accept the challenge, wouldn't it mean that we are afraid of them?" Kong Sheng nodded in agreement. "I don't like being looked down upon by others either. And although I don't have much of anything alone, I can't let the people from these small places really think that the Jiangnan region is like them, without any foundation." The two people continue to talk and laugh, belittling the various forces in Tianhai City. Not to mention Chen Jingguan, the second in command of Morning Dew Base, who had not been taken seriously from the start. "You are too arrogant. We may all be extraordinary people, but it doesn't imply that you are the strongest among us." Chen Jingguan pointed at the two of them with his right hand and scolded. Hearing this, Kong Sheng narrowed his eyes and sneered disdainfully. "Well, it looks like I need to show you the strength of the extraordinary people in the Jiangnan region. Comparing our strength to the strength of the extraordinary people in small places like this, especially you, is a direct insult to our district." Seeing an inevitable direct confrontation between the two, everyone from the various major forces gathered to watch the fight. After all, they were all curious to see just how powerful these people from the Jiangnan region were. Chen Jingguan saw Kong Sheng walk towards him and got into a fighting stance. The reason why Chen Jingguan chose Kong Sheng was because he had judged from his actions that he was a user of the enhancement system. And the enhancement or reinforcement system was the most common and the simplest of the 6 major systems of the superpowers hierarchy. You see, all superpowers of the enhancement system were mutations based on physical abilities, so they were extremely powerful in close combat. But Chen Jingguan was confident in his special system ability, the rubber, and unless the attack exceeds his defense threshold, all physical forms of attack will be ineffective against him. This threshold strength of his, verified during the Battle of the 5 Forces, had exceeded a direct artillery fire, so his confidence was justified. Kong Shang raised his hands and posed a free fighting posture. At the same time, his body suddenly glowed with a layer of silver-gray light. The skin around him seemed to have turned into steel. Kong Shang, a reinforcement ability user, had the ability Forged Steel, which could turn his body into steel-like solid, and both defense and attack power had become extremely strong. When Chen Jingguan saw that Kong Shang's ability was indeed as he thought, a reinforcement system, the corners of his mouth involuntarily raised into a smile. He beckoned Kong Shang with his finger, meaning Kong Shang was allowed the first move in their fight. Uncle Yu watched this scene from a distance and couldn't help but say, "The guy from Jiangnan district is going to suffer." The ability of Chen Jingguan was very strange, and it had a restraining effectiveness in close combat. I know this because I had suffered a loss at the hands of Chen Jingguan. If there were no helpers beside me, I might have been strangled to death. I even have lingering worries when it comes to him. Hearing this, Liang Yu took a good look at Kong Shang's opening move and said, "But the opponent is also a master. You can see it from his breathing and movements. No one knows what the result will be." There was no absolute strength or weakness in the battle between mutants. It all depends on the ability to respond to the enemy on the spot. Back to the fight, Kong Shang sneered. Even though he knew that the person who attacked first was most likely to reveal flaws, he was still fearless. The next moment, he rushed towards Chen Jingguan like a whirlwind. A swish sound sounded as he did so. Kong Shang did not rush towards Chen Jingguan from the front, but moved past him, appearing behind Chen Jingguan in a flash. Everyone saw this as a blur. The speed was so fast that they didn't see clearly how he did it. A whip kick hit Chen Jingguan's back fiercely. Kong Shang's speed was too fast, so Chen Jingguan couldn't defend it at all. But Kong Shang was mindful of not hurting his opponent severely. He held back and didn't aim at the back of Chen Jingguan's head. However, when Kong Shang's whip kick hit Chen Jingguan's body, he didn't feel the strong touch. Chen Jingguan's body sank in as if he had no bones. Huh? Kong Shang frowned, and a look of surprise appeared in his eyes. The next second, Chen Jingguan's body twisted and directly wrapped around his right leg. Without giving Kong Shang a chance to withdraw, Chen Jingguan was like a maggot on the tarsal bone, then proceeded to directly wrapped around his thigh. After a while, Chen Jingguan tied Kong Shang up tightly. He looked like a huge human snake, and his twisted body wrapped around Kong Shang 5 or 6 times. It was hard to imagine that it was a human body. Seeing this, Kong Shang immediately began to exert his strength to break free from Chen Jingguan's restraints. However, no matter how hard he exerted his strength, the strength he exerted on Chen Jingguan was quickly dissolved. And every time he struggled, Chen Jingguan shrank tighter. Crack, crack, crack. The steel body was tightly bound and crushed, making a sound that made people's teeth ache. "Don't struggle. If you keep going like this, I'm afraid I'll accidentally crush your bones." Chen Jingguan's head came close to Kong Shang from behind with a smile. "No matter how strong you are, as long as you are entangled by me, you can't escape. You'd better admit defeat." Hearing this, Kong Shang sneered. His right hand was put together, turning into an indestructible sword, cutting towards Chen Jingguan's torso. However, even a hand knife comparable to steel had no effect on Chen Jingguan, who was sticky and slippery. In addition, the cut torn his clothes, revealing his slippery body inside, and that was it. There was no other effect. Seeing this, Chen Jingguan couldn't help himself and started laughing in a mocking manner. "I've told you, anyone from the reinforcement department will have no choice but to surrender when they meet me. If you don't behave, I'll break your bones. So what if you're a mutant from the Jiangnan region? I hope this serves as a lesson to never underestimate anyone, especially me." Kong Shang was tied up tightly, unable to move his hands and feet. Facing such a tough opponent, the onlookers almost all believed that he was powerless to fight back. Uncle Yu, with his arms folded, couldn't help but recall his own personal experience. He shook his head slightly and commented that the outcome has been decided. But at this moment, Kong Shang, who was tied up tightly, suddenly turned his head and opened his mouth towards Chen Jingguan's head. Then, a sharp dagger came out of his mouth and accurately hit Chen Jingguan's left eye with a loud puff. Blood splattered everywhere as Chen Jingguan howled in pain. And due to the severe pain, he could no longer maintain his restraint on Kong Shang. So Kong Shang suddenly increased his strength, and with his sharp dagger still in his mouth, he sliced Chen Jingguan away. Chen Jingguan stood firm on the snowy ground, enduring the severe pain from where his left eye used to be. Seeing this, Kong Shang spat out a piece of the dagger and laughed. The rest reverted to his tongue. At this moment, it was obvious that the dagger that just came out of his mouth was his tongue. "I thought your eyeballs could also turn into rubber." Kong Shang licked his lips in full delight as he said this. Uncle Yu couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. He can even strengthen his tongue, turning it into a dagger to pierce Chun Jingguan's eyeball. The change in situation had surprised everyone. Originally, they thought Qin Jingguan was sure to win, but no one expected such a reversal. Sitting on the snowy field, Chun Jingguan looked at Kong Shang with his other eye full of resentment. He covered his injured right eye, gritted his teeth, and asked unwillingly, "How do you know where my weakness was?" Kong Shang just smiled and simply said, "Your body can turn into rubber, but if your eyes could also change, then wouldn't you become blind?" This was understandable. The reason why the eyes can see things is that they can receive light sources and then transmit them to the retina nerves. But once Qin Jingguan's eyes are also deformed, the light will be distorted and naturally become the same as a blind person. Therefore, Kong Shang guessed right that Qin Jingguan's weakness is in his eyes. "Go get treatment quickly. If you are late, you will die," Kong Shang said to Qin Jingguan with a big laugh. After all, in such a cold environment, getting injured was not a trivial matter. Kong Shang won the fight cleanly and swiftly without any drag. And after he defeated Qin Jingguan, he crossed his arms and said to everyone around him with some reluctance, "If anyone thinks they have the strength, they can come and fight with me now." Everyone understood that Kong Shang and the others were trying to establish their authority. However, seeing Qin Jingguan's impregnable defense breached so easily, no one from either Morning Dew Base or Radiant Prosperity Base accepted the challenge as complete silence ensues. On the other hand, Qin Jingguan was receiving treatment by his fellow soldier. Seeing that no one had the guts to fight, Kong Shang shrugged his shoulders in boredom, then turned around and walked back lazily. In the meeting room on the second floor, Bian Junwu, after exchanging intel, placed his hands on the table and began to issue combat instructions. "Very good. I have listened to the information provided by each of you. Combined with the information we have, I already know what to do next." Everyone's eyes flickered, and they were quite expectant. The intelligence system possessed by the Jiangnan region must be far beyond their reach. However, they were very curious about how much intelligence the regional headquarters in Jinling had on Tianhai City. Bian Zhanwu's eyes swept over the crowd through his large dark toad-shaped glasses, and he spoke in a serious tone. "According to our investigation, the zombies like to attack crowded places. The more people there are, the more zombies are attracted. And the rat swarm and the corpse swarm are in a companion relationship, and they always follow the corpse swarm. So as long as the corpse swarm can be solved, the problem of the rat swarm will not be difficult to solve. And according to the intelligence, the corpse swarm shows a certain regularity in its actions, and it can almost be concluded that there is a corpse king behind it directing it. Of course, corpse king is just a code name. It may be a powerful zombie or it may be a mutant, and the number of corpse swarms is extremely terrifying and can sustain battles in many places in Tianhai City." Bian Junwu raised his voice by several decibels and continued. "Then, based on this information, we can basically conclude that it is useless to just eliminate the corpses on the surface. They were puppets after all. Only by eliminating the thing called the Corpse King can we eliminate the corpse-tide turmoil in Tianhai City from the root. So from now on, I ask you, the major forces, to move most of the population underground. Avoid being in a passively beaten situation all the time. Then concentrate the elite troops in your hands and focus on eliminating the Corpse King." This meant that the major bases should not be greedy for their own little piece of land. The Emerald Waterside base should give up the steel mill, Radiant Prosperity base should give up the oil refinery, and Morning Dew base should give up the port. The leaders of the three forces looked at each other. Although there was some hesitation in their eyes, they finally nodded and agreed after some consideration. In the past, they were unwilling to give up the resources on the surface because they were worried that their future living space would be affected. And even if they gave up the surface resources, they still couldn't solve the corpse tide. But now that people from the Jiangnan district have endorsed them and given them unified command, they have confidence to finally have the ability to put this zombie tide to bed once and for all. It was obvious at this point that when all the major forces sit together and form a united front, many problems would be easily solved. However, at this moment, the high priest of the snow worship sect, who was sitting at the end, spoke up. "What should we do?" Zhang Yi frowned, obviously unhappy. Zhang Yi points accusatory finger at Bian Junwu and continued. "The other four forces had their own underground shelters and high-level shelters. But our snow worship sect had no such thing. Actually, we have nothing." Zhang Yi then got up from his chair to protest some more. "Mr. Bian, you can't be partial in this matter. The lives of my people are at stake." Bian Junwu heard this and turned to look at Zhang Yi. His next words just came out coldly. "You have thousands of followers in your sect. They joined your cult. How to protect them is the responsibility of your sect. What did you expect? Did you expect us to help you protect your disciples?" Hearing this, Zhang Yixin's face turned ugly. He gritted his teeth tightly as he continued to stare at Bien Junwoo with a murderous look. And before he could refute, Bien Junwoo continued issuing out their plans, ignoring Zhang Yixian's murderous gaze without any concern. We can only formulate tactical plans based on your current conditions. If you don't even have this awareness, you can only be destroyed by the zombie tide. It became an undeniable fact that Bien Junwoo didn't care about who lives or dies. What he cared about was whether the zombie crisis in Tianhai City could be eliminated. Therefore, possibly putting an end to the zombie virus which would eventually spread to all the surrounding areas. Zhang Yixian gasps in shock when he heard this, so he questioned in disbelief. Wait, so in other words, what you are implying is that you intend on watching my people die as a sacrifice? If all the other forces go underground, then wouldn't my snow worship sect undoubtedly become the biggest target of the zombie group? How can our believers survive then? Zhang Yi raised his eyebrows with a hint of amusement on his lips, as if to say, hey, what about your snow god? Is he too lazy to protect you guys or what? Zhang Yi was really enjoying the show. Also, Xiao Honglian, Wei Dinghai and Xing Tian all looked disinterested and unconcerned. They really didn't care about the life and death of the snow worship sect. After all, Zhang Yixian's disapproving statement, in their point of view, was absurd to think of. Did he honestly believe that they would risk their lives for his damn cult? Xiao Honglian even sneered and said, you have so many followers in your sect, most of whom are people without combat ability. If you don't have that much power, don't attract so many disciples. If something goes wrong now, you should take the responsibility yourself. Xiao Honglian had long been dissatisfied with the snow worship sect. So naturally, she wouldn't miss this opportunity to bare her claws. Zhang Yixian stared at Xiao Honglian with a deep murderous intent in his eyes. At this time, Bien Junwoo spoke to break the deadlock. The existence of the snow worship cult also has its significance. If you can't hide your members well, then you can still play another role. Bien Junwoo's words gave Zhang Yixian a ray of hope. Oh, what are your plans? Bien Junwoo just glanced at him coldly. I can't tell you now. It's confidential. But I will tell you the answer in 3 days at most. Now, you all go back and arrange your own people according to my orders. I will inform you of any actions next. Bien Junwoo was mysterious. When everyone wanted to ask again, he just waved his hand and asked everyone to leave. No one could do anything. After all, he was a special commissioner of the Jiangnan district. And everyone was afraid of the strength of the Jiangnan district, so they chose to obey the orders. The group stood up and left the meeting room. Zhang Yi was about to leave when he was stopped by Bien Junwoo. Zhang Yi, wait a minute. Everyone had different expressions on their faces. They didn't know what Bien Junwoo wanted to talk to Zhang Yi about alone. But considering that Zhang Yi was the only one who solved the zombie problem within his sphere of influence, everyone understood why Bien Junwoo wanted to find him. Zhang Yi raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, Mr. Bien, do you have any advice? Bien Junwoo walked to Zhang Yi's side, and for the first time, a smile appeared on his pale and thin face. Can I go to your place and sit for a while? Zhang Yi didn't expect Bien Junwoo to make such a request, and he frowned, subconsciously wanting to refuse.